Okay. All right, well, sorry about that. Thanks for your patience. So my name is Aaron Stanley. I'm editorial director with the Filecoin Foundation, and we'll be talking today a bit about Filecoin. I want to introduce Filecoin to you. I'm assuming some of you have at least heard of the project. It's been around for a while. I want to talk a bit about Filecoin and also talk about some of the product market fit that Filecoin is finding in the world of, now that we're in this world of AI, right? The last presentation was talking about this as well. And in the world of AI, we're going to have a need for blockchain, crypto-powered storage networks that offer immutability, authenticity, reliability of data storage and data access. So that's what we're going to be kind of talking about today. It'll be pretty, it won't be like super in-depth technical, but it'll just kind of give an overview of like what Filecoin is, how the network's grown, and how it kind of overlays into computing and AI questions. So, quick introduction, some name brands you may be familiar with. Protocol Labs was the lab that originally built Filecoin, and IPFS, which if you're a crypto, Web3, Bitcoin developer of some form, you've probably at least used IPFS or heard of IPFS in some form. Filecoin Foundation is the steward of the Filecoin community. So I work for the foundation, not Protocol Labs, but we're sort of the open source foundation that's responsible for some of the governments and community and just sort of stewarding the ecosystem. And this is a slide from from Juan Bennett, who's the kind of the founder of Protocol Labs and kind of the brain behind a lot of these innovations. And this is a slide that I took from him because I think it really kind of identifies the problem well, right? And the core issue that we have or one of the core issues that we have in the world of Web3 and crypto is that we have all these applications, we have all these innovations, and these kind of novel proofs of concepts and things, but we still have a massive chasm to cross as it relates to being able to build these applications at like Web 2 scale. There's, to being able to do like Google, Facebook, Meta, Twitter, applications that can scale to this level in a decentralized fashion is still a major challenge, right? There's a massive chasm to be crossed here. So this is where sort of Filecoin like fits in. Is like, in order to cross this chasm, we have to have a blockchain, crypto-powered storage, decentralized storage network that can really facilitate these types of applications, right? Or essentially be the foundation for these types of applications and these types of primitives to be built on top of. So what is Filecoin? So Filecoin is a crypto-powered storage network. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of how it works here in a little bit. But it's become sort of the default storage network for Web3. If you own an NFT, there's a good chance that it's stored on the Filecoin network. There's something like 100 million NFTs that are currently stored through gateways like OpenSea and some of these other NFT marketplaces. We've been doing a lot in the world of chain archiving. So the Solana, the whole block history of the Solana blockchain is now stored and backed up on the Filecoin network. And the mission of Filecoin is really to create a decentralized, efficient, robust foundation for humanity's data. And kind of the analogy I like to think of, or the way I like to describe it, is with IPFS, which is kind of like a cousin, like sister protocol to Filecoin. IPFS is specifically for content addressing, right? So you can think of instead of it's like a unique fingerprint essentially for a piece of content. So instead of searching for a piece of content, going and typing in the address, that content's identified by a unique cryptographic hash that represents what that content is, not necessarily where it lives. And then that content is then sort of is stored and retrieved on various nodes on the IPFS network. And the idea of Filecoin is really to be sort of like the longer, the kind of the cold storage, like archival storage layer that can store all of this data, right? And before I really dive in here, I'm just going to kind of give sometimes I like giving the spoiler at the beginning of the presentation, just because it kind of gives folks, puts things in context. So as we move into this world of a data economy, right, where data is going to become increasingly more important, we're manufacturing more data every single year. The compound annual growth rate on data, the data being produced and stored is growing by double digits every single year. In the world of AI models and training and things like this, the question of like, where does this data get stored? Where are these models? What data sets are these models training their models with? All of these are questions that Filecoin has an interesting role to play in, right? Specifically for these reasons I've highlighted at the bottom, where you have provenance, authenticity, and verifiability. So in this world where we're going to become increasingly reliant on various LLMs, asking it for information about certain topics. But like, how are these LLMs trained? What data sets were these things used on, right? How can we verify that? How can you verify to your users that this application you built was built using the data set that you say it was? How do you know that the data set that you trained your model off of it was not itself, was not also like generated, is not just like sort of generative AI data. It's like, how do you know this is real data? How do you know it hasn't been tampered with? How can you trust that the data that you're storing on AWS, for example, isn't being, maybe they say they're not going to use it for AI, AI training, but how can you verify that, right? You don't really know. So all of these are things to kind of think about as we're talking through the presentation here. So a little background on Filecoin. We were one of the big projects in 2017 to raise a big token sale, about 200 million. This 257 is actually not correct. It was more like 200 million, a little slightly over. So we raised in 2017. We were one of the first. We actually co-wrote the white paper for the SAFT. If you're familiar with the SAFT agreement, a lot of folks were doing token sales back then using this framework. And we finally launched in October 2020 the Filecoin mainnet. I should also point out that if any of you were involved in like the crecimiento movement or that activity, the Aleph city here in Buenos Aires that took place in August, Juan Bennett, the founder of Filecoin, is actually one of the core stewards of that as well. He was one of the original angel investors to kind of kickstart this crecimiento movement here in Argentina. So just thought I'd mention that. Not really relevant to this presentation, but worth mentioning. And the Filecoin master plan is really kind of a three-step thing if you boil it down. So the first is to build the world's largest decentralized storage network. And when we talk about a decentralized storage network, we're talking like physical brick and mortar data centers that are storing real data all around the world and storing like large data sets, not just cat photos or small things, but like enterprise grade data sets, right? Second phase is to bring data onto the network, right? Once you have all this capacity, let's bring data onto the network. And then step three is once you have data on the network, what other things are enabled on top of that? And the answer is going to be bringing computation to that data. And we'll talk about that a bit. And this is also kind of the key to really unlocking a lot of these like web scale, like Web 2 scale apps in the world of Web 3, right? So we've basically accomplished step one, right? We've got a data center network of we have about 2,000 data center storage providers around the world. We have about roughly like 5 exabytes worth of storage capacity, which is so basically like 1 terabyte. In data terms, this is kind of weird because these are such large figures that's hard to explain. But like a 1 terabyte would be equivalent to something like 25,000 copies of Wikipedia or something. It's like some absurd number. So like an exabyte is basically like 1,000 terabytes. So we've got a massive amount of capacity. We've got about 1.5 exabytes worth of data currently stored on the network. So the utilization rate is about like 25-30%, and we'll have a slide about that. And then this is a helpful way of, this is from Edge and Node, this isn't something we produced, but this is sort of a helpful way of just identifying like how file storage fits into the broader Web3 stack, right? So you have your layer 1 chains, you have your layer 2s and side chains, you have your developer tooling, and on the other side you have your client, like your user-facing applications and identity and things like that. But one of the core kind of missing pieces, or like one of the puzzles that people have been trying to wrestle with, is this question of like data storage, right? Whether both in terms of like data availability, if when you're talking about Ethereum kind of modular things, but then also even just storing data just generally, right? For more like longer term purposes. And people have experimented with like Arweave has kind of more of like a permanent storage model where you pay like an upfront fee, and then that file is going to be stored basically forever. But there's scaling problems with that because the fees can be kind of expensive depending how large your file is, and there's other issues with that as well. So this is just kind of a helpful way of understanding how Filecoin and like the question of storage fits into this stack here. And then why do we care if it's like decentralized or not? Like it's like data storage is data storage. Why do we care where it's stored, right? Well, it should be fairly obvious, but a centralized data is currently being stored in three, like your AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. It's basically, they have kind of a monopoly on data storage, right? And not just data storage, but also a lot of the service, like the compute and other types of data services on top of that. And obviously, like anytime you have a single point of failure, it can happen, right? So kind of preaching to the choir here about why we need like decentralized distributed systems in this case, but there's a pretty interesting value proposition for like why we need decentralized data storage. For basically like censorship resistance, privacy, verification, non-siloing, et cetera, et cetera. And this is, we don't need to go super in depth here, but this is just kind of how a Filecoin storage deal actually works. So the main thing to remember would be like, if I'm a data client, I have, say a petabyte of data, I want to go store this on Filecoin. I go to a Filecoin storage provider, and we cut a deal. The storage provider takes my data, replicates that, uploads that into his system, onto his data center, and he runs a cryptographic zero-knowledge proof and attests to the blockchain that this data was successfully copied over, right? So it's like a one-to-one copy, right? Replication. And then, so that's called proof of replication, right? And then every day thereafter, that storage provider needs to run what's called a proof of space-time, which is another cryptographic proof that is essentially just verifying that that data set is still there. Like it's still there, it hasn't been tampered with, it's available, it's not missing, it's not broken, et cetera, et cetera. And then for doing this, the storage providers earn block rewards in Filecoin. They can also charge fiat currency for their or Filecoin for their deals as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of block rewards. And then, but for the privilege of being able to store data and earn block rewards, the storage providers need to post collateral. So they post Filecoin as collateral, and then once the term of the storage deal expires, they receive their collateral back. If they're failing to run their proofs of space-time every day, if there's some sort of issue with downtime, then they will be slashed on their collateral. So it's sort of a carrot and stick approach to incentivizing these data center operators to be sort of acting in the best interest of the client, right? So the idea is like Filecoin is really a storage network designed for like ground up for the Web3. So it's compatible with IPFS, integrates with other chains. It has Ethereum virtual machine compatibility. Filecoin, someone was telling me the other day, I don't know if this is true or not, I don't have a statistic or a reference, but someone was telling me that the Filecoin network is actually the largest use case of zero-knowledge proofs in crypto right now, just because every storage provider and network is running multiple zero-knowledge proofs every single day to attest that the data sets they have stored on their facility are sound. And we have a massive decentralized network of data centers and a community that's global, really. So, and this is kind of we won't get super in depth here, but this is basically talking about how storage deals can be renewed. It's not like a permanent storage model like Arweave has, but there's various ways of being able to renew deals via smart contracts and things of that nature if that's what the client wants, right? But the idea is more of like customization and resilience rather than just saying like we're just going to store this on the blockchain forever, right? And the other big thing is redundancy, right? No system is going to be like 100% secure, foolproof, hacker-proof, whatever. But the idea is that for a data client, being able to store your data redundantly across multiple storage providers around the world, secured cryptographically, means that, okay, if one data center in North America goes down, if one in Europe goes down, you still have your data stored in these other 3 places in South America, for example. So that's sort of the idea is redundancy, right? And then, so who's actually using this? Sounds great, who's using it? IPFS is pretty standard thing, right? It's a pretty kind of standard part of any developer toolkit at this stage. We have a few another slide with some other data sets on Filecoin that I'll talk about here in a second, right here. So we have about 2,000 plus actual data sets stored on Filecoin right now, everything from more like kind of Web3 native things to like the Solana blockchain, as I mentioned. It's not on this slide, but we have the backup of the Solana blockchain being stored. We actually have, in recent months, we uploaded a data set from this group called SETI, S-E-T-I, which is this group that's I'm not entirely familiar with them, but I think they're the group that's like searching for extraterrestrial alien life, right? So they have all this kind of like satellite data from scanning the skies looking for aliens, basically, but they have to store this data somewhere. So they're actually storing that data on Filecoin now. And we actually have a lot of other interesting data sets around from kind of academic and research institutions. There's a group out of CERN, like the physics laboratory in Switzerland, that's storing a 10 petabyte data set on Filecoin network right now. Basically, like anything that's really relevant for like archival storage, where storing with a traditional like AWS or Google Cloud may not make sense for cost reasons. Where the way that these models work is that if you have a startup or a company that uses AWS or something, you probably know this intimately, but they say like, hey, like put your data in AWS, it's free. Like we won't charge you anything. We'll give you some free credits, right? But then when you want to take your data off, you want to retrieve your data, then you have to give up your like left kidney for it, right? It's they kind of charge a lot on the egress fees essentially. So we're able to provide, or Filecoin is able to provide a different type of cost structure essentially for people with large data sets that they want stored in an archival fashion. And here's some metrics, just pulling this from the Masari report that just came out last week, so it's sort of hot off the press, so I put a few of these charts in here. Circulating market cap, 2.5 billion. We've got about 2,100 active storage providers, about 600 million worth of Filecoin staked with liquid staking providers. And this is actually an interesting innovation with liquid staking providers where, so remember I mentioned how the storage providers need to access Filecoin to put up as collateral. It's like, well, where do they get that Filecoin from? Well, there's actually liquid staking providers where they can essentially lend or borrow that Filecoin, use as collateral, and like retail or institutions can actually stake their Filecoin with these pools and earn a bit of a yield. So it's a good example of like a DeFi use case where there's like a real world cash flow, right? It's not one of these things where like, you are the yield type of thing, but it's like there's a real world cash flow attached to these DeFi returns, right? So we have over 500 large data sets of over 1,000 terabytes on the network right now. This is just kind of talking about we've had an uptick, kind of the flow of daily storage deals. It's been sort of trending down a little bit, but kind of picking back up in the third quarter here. And the word that I haven't said yet that you may be thinking about is this term DePIN, right? Like it's kind of the favorite like VC word of the year, right? Decentralized physical infrastructure. So we kind of like to joke that we're like, hey, we're sort of the OG DePIN project, right? We've been doing this since 2020, even before it became a term, et cetera, et cetera. We've already kind of deployed all over the world. And one of the interesting things that I mentioned in the kind of the master plan on the earlier slide is that the idea for Filecoins will be a base for compute networks, right? So you have this decentralized data storage layer, and then on top of that you can build, it basically becomes like a layer 1 that other like layer 2 compute networks can be built on top of, right? And why would this be relevant for a decentralized compute? So you have this issue of like data has gravity, right? So like moving around data sets is like a very complicated thing, right? It's very large, it's very slow, it's expensive to move data sets around. But if you can offer compute jobs over the data where the data is stored locally, that becomes a much more efficient way of offering this service. And it also becomes another revenue model for storage providers who they can charge for the storage, they can also charge for the compute jobs, right? And we do have a lot of Filecoin storage providers that are running, they're running like storage operations, but they're also running GPUs and they're contributing compute power to networks like Aether, IONET, Akash, some of these other types of groups. I'm going to kind of go through some of this quick because we're running out of time. But so these are some of the compute L2 networks that are just about to launch or have already launched or are just launching now on Filecoin. So some of these have different kind of value propositions. One is trying to focus more on kind of like enterprise customers and on-chain data lakes and things of that nature. Other ones, Sriracha is really focused on the retrieval side. So they're focusing on taking like large data sets, sharding those data sets, and basically creating like a hot layer on top of Filecoin that is like easily retrievable via sharding or sharded pieces of the data set. And then Basin is really focused on kind of like a hybrid, like hot and cold storage layer essentially. And And of course, you can't go to a crypto conference nowadays without talking about decentralized AI. So, well, so I guess the point you're trying to make is like, if you really want decentralized AI, we've all kind of seen the headlines about, like what's going to happen if Sam Altman achieves, his like world dominance of ChatGPT and OpenAI and whatever. And how can the world of decentralized AI possibly serve as some sort of competition or some sort of alternative to that, right? And I mean, the argument would be that you really need a kind of a blockchain-based, crypto-powered storage network at the bottom of that stack to really build any kind of meaningfully decentralized AI models or products. And for the simple reason that like if you're building your AI application off of on top of AWS, it's like it's not like actually decentralized, right? That's the single point of failure. It can be corrupted. So, all right, I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to kind of speed through these other things. So here's some things where we've been announcing some partnerships with different AI companies around like AI agents. So folks using Filecoin data sets to train their data, to train their models essentially, with the value proposition that like if you know that if I'm training an AI model, an AI agent, I want to be able to train that off of data that I know is like pure and untampered and like it has not been messed with. It is the original thing. It's not just something that some other AI model produced and is just kind of like this mumbo jumbo of data, but it's like the real data set, right? And I need to be able to verify that. I need to be able to demonstrate that to my customers who are going to be using this product, et cetera. I need to verify that this data that I trained my model with is legitimate data, right? So, anyway, so we've got a lot of like kind of partnerships along those lines in the works that we've already launched and are doing more of these. And yeah, and we've also got sort of a community program that I'm helping to run as well at the foundation, which is really about more of trying to kind of evangelize a bit more, right? We've trying to do more kind of community work, trying to do more outreach across the crypto world as well as kind of the decentralized AI world, since we occupy this kind of interesting niche in these two worlds. So if folks are interested in like learning more or like partnering, or if you're working on like an AI project or a compute project that might be of interest here, or if you have kind of any other type of like project that might be adjacent to this or fit nicely on top of this, happy to be a resource here. And this is just some of the stuff we've been doing. We've been doing a lot of kind of meetups and hackathons and things around the world, primarily like in Asia and Europe lately. So we're trying to do a bit more of a focus in South America, just because it hasn't really been a huge focus. But like I'm living here now, so I'm trying to do a bit more kind of just engaging with the community and going to events and trying to host things and whatnot. So, and then we have like a Discord and a Telegram as well if folks want to follow us. Yeah, feel free, and happy to answer any questions. I'll stick around for a few minutes afterwards. So appreciate your time.